Hey everybody, Dawn here. In this video, we're going to talk about my layoff for my engineering job, the aftermath. So what we're going to talk about in this video is what happened right after, my decision-making process, what I'm doing now, and, my plans for the future. So what happened after the layoff? After the layoff, obviously, it was quite emotional. So I took some time to decompress. And after I did that, the immediate thing on the horizon was legally, what do I do? What do I do to stay compliant with immigration standards in the US? So what I did was I scheduled some time with a lawyer, asked them questions, which I'll share here, and I'll also share their responses. So for context, I had 9 days to go on my TN visa before it expired, right? So time wasn't on my side. I had a lot of questions, including, do I have to move back to Canada within 9 days? Do I have that 60-day grace period? So what the lawyer told me is, no, you do not have your 60-day grace period, but, you have to leave within 9 days, but you can come back on a tourist visa in order to clean up your stuff. When they ask you what is your purpose of traveling to the United States today, as most border agents will usually do, you can say, hey, I got laid off from my TN employer. I'm just here to clean up my stuff, clean up my apartment, and return to Canada for good. And you should be good there. So what I did was I scheduled a trip from San Francisco to Toronto and Toronto to San Francisco back. I did that. Everything was all good. Then I proceeded to start selling my stuff. So I was selling my cars, selling my toys, selling all my stuff in my room so that I would have less stuff to move, because to be honest, it's kind of stressful to move so much stuff. And if we're being honest here, you don't need half the shit that you end up bringing anyway. So that's what I was doing for the last month or so. Could have extended it to 60 days, but you might be asking yourself, what happened after the 60 days or after the time where you started to sell all your stuff? Well, for me, I think the best thing for me at that period of time, and as of now, was to return to Canada. Now, why did I not stay in the US, right? You would think that, if you stay in the US, you're closer to networking, all that kind of stuff, but you have to think of the trade-offs that you're making with that decision there, right? So the decision there is, if you stay in the US, you cannot work. You're relying exclusively on savings unless you work under the table, which, well, one, is illegal, and two, again, is not compliant by immigration laws. You cannot work on a tourist visa, right? So the most important thing for me was to stay good on the immigration visa front so I can return in the future, right? So that was one option. And, while networking can be a valuable asset, there are ways around it. So if I went back to Canada, I would be good in terms of the law. I can work any employer I want. I can work at Starbucks. I can do Uber. I can do a whole bunch of other things. So at the end of the day, and if I went back to Canada, I would preserve my US-based savings so that when I go back, I have that nest egg that I already have that I can start. I don't have to worry about building my emergency fund and all of that different stuff, right? So that's the decision that I end up making, is to return to Canada. And as hard as it was, I think it was the best decision for me, because I have a significant amount, of my US dollars saved because I moved back so quickly. As hard as it was to let go of those connections that you make in a new city, at the end of the day, I had to take care of myself, and I needed to make those hard decisions to move back. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, you mentioned that, you're moving back. That doesn't mean that you're saving a whole lot of money. What are you going to do from here, right? So what I'm doing now is I actually moved back into my parents' house, right? So the reason for that is because although, it's not the best thing in terms of your ego to do so, to move back to your parents' house in your late 20s, but at the end of the day, the financial stability that it would provide me is very, very valuable to me during this period of time. And, it's going to allow me a much larger financial runway. Now, I will acknowledge not everybody has a good relationship with their family, with their parents, with, close relatives in order to do so. I will say that I'm lucky to have that, right? So if you're in a position where you don't have that option, I still think it might be a good option to return to Canada because you're not bound by all the immigration laws. You can pursue the opportunities remotely from Canada to the US, as I've done when I graduated college and I got the job in the first place. There's nothing wrong with that, and you can totally do that, right? So that's kind of the decision making framework that I made, and I ended up moving back to Canada, had all my stuff, yada 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 yada, right? So what am I gonna do from here? What's my next step? What's my plan? Well, because I have this financial runway, I'm living with my parents, I don't have, the stress of bills like rent and food and high prices. I'm going to take this time to upskill and really focus on those long-term projects, right? What do I mean by long-term projects? Well, I recently interviewed at LinkedIn just last week, right? And I've realized that technically my skills aren't really there yet, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, right? So what I need to do is I really need to hunker down and really focus on getting technically competent, right? So that's goal number one. Goal number two is I want to make sure that I'm building more of an authority in my space. So it's going to be the iOS space, and I'm going to do that by posting a lot more on social media. You might have seen a very sporadic amount of YouTube videos that I put out with my layoff here. I'm going to be posting a lot more often, and it's going to be a lot more technical content, right? The reason for this is because one thing I've learned in sales is providing value is the best way to get something back. Because if you provide value for people, then you don't really ask for anything in return. They feel like they kind of owe you something, right? And the hope is that they owe you a job, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about job hunting strategy, the meantime, what I'm going to do in the long term and the short term. So, for the long term, making content, building myself as an authority figure, and my main target is probably going to be iOS positions, but because I have a background in electrical engineering as well, I'm also going to target electrical positions, during this period of time. While I do have the financial runway to be a little bit more picky, that doesn't mean I'm laser focused on software. I can lean into my electrical background and, open up a new door for that as well, right? Now let's talk a little bit about, kind of what do you do in the meantime? Are you going to make an income? That kind of thing. And the answer is yes. I already have a job lined up. I'm going to probably go back to my old college job. And my old college job was being a lifeguard. I worked that from 16 to 26, and then took a break to work my engineering job, and I'm going to go back. I have the experience, and there's also a wall there, so it's pretty much guaranteed employment. My ego doesn't like it at all. I will admit I don't really like the prospect of, going back to a pool as a 28-year-old lifeguard, but at the end of the day, I have to swallow my pride and say that I put myself in this position. I didn't have leverage, so I have to kind of pay the consequence, right? It's basically you got to do what you got to do, right? But, now that kind of presents the question here of, do I plan on going to the US moving forward? And the answer is definitely yes, but under very specific circumstances, right? What I've learned from this experience is this company that I was working on was a small startup. They didn't pay, market rate. So, and I didn't really have any leverage, so I accepted it anyway. I'm going to be totally honest with you. And it came back to haunt me because I was on TN. I had no hopes of, getting dual citizenship, and then it ended me in this position. So, If I do choose to return to the US, it better be for a good opportunity and for me to at least have the opportunity to get a green card or permanent residency, so I don't have to move back to Canada on a leg. It's not really about getting American citizenship. It's more about, not uprooting your life just because there's a loss of employment. I think that's the most important thing for me in my next role. Now, you might be asking yourself as well, will I be applying to Canadian positions? And the answer is yes. I've experienced America. I absolutely love it. But at the end of the day, in order for me to go back, it has to be for the reasons why I wanted to go there in the first place. I wanted the opportunity. I wanted the high salaries. I'm ambitious. I wanted to network with great people. While I've achieved some of them, I haven't achieved all of them. And for me, unless I'm achieving, at least 80 or 90% of my criterion, why the States makes sense, I think at the end of the day, it's best if it's a smaller company, if, it's a startup, if I'm getting paid under market value, I think it makes sense for me to stay in Canada, right? So that's probably my job hunting strategy moving forward. So that's a video, kind of an update on my life, what I'm going to do moving forward. So expect more videos from me, more lead code grind streams. I'm going to try to do it on most weekdays here and there. I might do a little bit more live streams on open source as well. Start pumping out, iOS oriented videos. So look out for that. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope that was helpful. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.